Helldivers 2 isn't just about hogging all the glory. In fact, you'll either live or die because of your team, and each Helldiver is an important cog in that machine. Today we're going to dive into another Helldivers 2 build, something for the more support-minded player that likes to keep their team ready, locked, stocked, and loaded for action. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're sharing our ultimate support build, the Tech Technician. Let's start this conversation around weapons. This can go one of two ways depending on your playstyle. If you want to be a backline support who very rarely gets into the heat of things, then check out the R63 Diligence. This is a high damage, low capacity marksman rifle that I personally found very effective. Obviously, it requires accuracy and it's not an ideal weapon when facing down massive amounts of enemies, but in my experience, you don't necessarily need 4 Helldivers running in the front lines, and having someone watch your back and your flanks is preferable. Now on the flip side, you can't ignore weapons like the SG-225 Breaker, which are just insanely powerful, at least for now. The shotgun touts high damage, good capacity and fire rate, and is just as effective up close as it is at the mid-range. Right now, this is amongst the most popular guns in the game, but that could all change over time as the team balances the weapons. Either way, those are 2 solid options I'd recommend for this build. Where this build truly becomes support-centric is with the Stratagems. First up, we're going to be taking the recoilless rifle, which I know is nowhere near as strong as it was in the first game. I still love this weapon, especially if you play with a friend that can step in to help reload. In a perfect scenario, you have a teammate who's willing to pick up the backpack and help reload whenever it's needed, because the recoilless can easily take out armored targets, as well as the bot drop ships that get called in during automaton missions. The weapon is also the single best way to deal with charger enemies on the Terminid front. By shooting them in the front leg, you'll knock off the plate armor, revealing the enemy's weak spot. A few rounds from your primary weapon and that charger is no more. With a fellow Helldiver support, you can pretty much chain fire the recoilless, but you do have to stay together and pretty much stationary. It's a situation that demands some clear communication, but when it works right, it's a flurry of beautiful explosions. You can choose to reload yourself, but that does significantly increase the reload time, and as we'll talk about in just a second, you'll need your back slot free for the next stratagem. In fact, the stratagem you'll be taking yourself is the supply pack, which calls down another backpack. When first picked up, you'll have access to 4 supply packs, which restore ammo, grenades, and stims to any and all allies that you distribute a pack to. To do this, you simply need to go up to them and press the interact key. Again, clear communication is key, mainly because the ammo indicator in the game is currently bugged at the time of making this video. In most cases, you can just ask who needs supplies, but eventually that indicator will be working, so you'll see who needs a pack. You can also resupply yourself by using the backpack interact key, which defaults to 5 on the keyboard and is available for PS5. The supply pack can also be reloaded when using a supply drop, so it's relatively easy to keep your pack full at all times. You can also call down a supply pack again and receive a new backpack fully loaded, so in very few instances will you ever be out of supplies to give. This is one of the unsung heroes of the build. It certainly isn't sexy or flashy, but it's the cornerstone that keeps your team alive. Next on the list is the Mortar Sentry, which we covered in our first build guide, but here it plays an even more critical role. As you push into the higher difficulties, the stakes are raised, and it's even more important to save your offensive stratagems for when they really matter. If you communicate with your team effectively, you can use the mortar emplacement to soften targets before fully taking them out. This is effective on both the Tyranids and automaton front, and if you give the mortar the opportunity to work its magic, it's easy to sweep in after and clean up quickly. My only call out is that the mortar needs to be used in conjunction with clear communication. You can't just drop the mortar and expect your team to react accordingly. You need to be clear how and when you're going to use it so the team can adjust. The absolute worst time to use the mortar is when you're surrounded by enemies. It provides almost no value then, and chances are you'll wipe the entire team, so you'll have to be strategic about its use at all times. The last stratagem will depend on the front with which you're fighting. On the Terminid side, you'll want to take the Gatling Sentry, mainly because this thing chews through enemies. It's also a fantastic tool to protect your flank or thin out waves of enemies that may be collapsing on your position. This is the call-on you could potentially use if your team is surrounded by enemies and you need extra firepower. The other option is the Shield Generator Relay, and this is most effective on the automaton front because it blocks all incoming projectiles for a limited period of time. This is quintessential support because it gives your team that much needed space to navigate what I believe is the more challenging front. On the Terminid side, this really doesn't have the same impact because most enemies are melee, and that means the shield is pretty much useless. Since this is a step beyond a very early game build, I want to touch on ship modules, which provide passive bonuses to the various stratagems based on what you invest in. Throughout your missions, you'll want to be picking up any and all samples, and that means hitting as many points of interest as possible where samples are abundant. To enhance the support build, you'll want to go one of three ways. The Robotic Workshop ship modules increase the potency of all sentries. That means enhancements to both the Gatling Sentry and Mortar Sentry. With all three ship modules activated, you will see reduced deployment time of sentries, increased ammo capacity of sentries, and better targeting with higher rotation speeds. You'll also want to consider buying into the Patriotic Administration Center, which offers enhancements for all the support weapons in the game, as well as some of the support stratagems we talked about before. With all three ship modules activated here, you'll see increased magazine capacity for all support weapons. Sadly, this doesn't increase the capacity of the recoilless backpack, decreased cooldown time for all support weapons, and decreased cooldown time for all backpack stratagems. If becoming the ultimate support is what you want, you could invest in the engineering-based ship modules, and these improve the effectiveness of your sentries and emplacements. But really, it's the Rapid Launch System ship module that is the game changer here, removing the deployment time of the shield generator relay, making it an almost instant calldown in combat. You really can't go wrong with any path here, and eventually, you'll want to unlock the full array of 3 modules in all 3 categories. I also want to quickly talk about armor. As you may or may not know, all chest pieces have built-in bonuses that provide some sort of passive buff. At the time of making this video, however, armor mitigation is broken and the bonuses only apply to the chest piece, but as new content comes to the game, I have no doubt this will be fixed and those bonuses will expand to the helmet and potentially the cape slots as well. The 2 early game armor sets I like are the CE-35 Trench Engineer, which reduces recoil when crouching or prone by 30% and increases the initial inventory and holding capacity of grenades by +2. This is a bit more offensive focused, but it's still a solid choice. If you wanted to lean into the more support nature of the build, you could go with the SC-34 Infiltrator Armor, which does 2 things. Gives your placed markers the ability to scan the surrounding area for enemy threats, and reduces the range enemies can detect you by 30%. If you're trying to close the gap with an elite enemy before a recoilless shot, or just get into optimal position to support your team, this could provide some value. With the entire loadout assembled, let's circle back and break down everything in one concise view. For armor, you're most likely going to want to go with the CE-35 Trench Engineer set. This gives you reduced recoil and a couple extra grenades. For weapons, you'll want to take the R63 Diligence if you're going for a long-range playstyle, or the SG-225 Breaker if you'd rather fight up close. For a secondary, we choose the P19 Redeemer, which is easily the best early game option available to players thanks to its high damage and blistering rate of fire. For stratagems, we're taking the recoilless rifle, which is a huge focus of the build, the supply pack for all those sweet ammunition, stim, and grenade refills, the mortar sentry so that you can thin out enemy packs around points of interest, and then either the Gatling sentry on the Terminid side or the shield generator relay on the automaton side. This is the foundation of our ultimate support build, and once we break down the playstyle, you will become an invaluable asset to your team. A reminder that you'll want to invest in the Robotics Workshop, Patriotic Administration Center, and Engineer Bay as you upgrade your ship modules, which ultimately enhance your build. So what does it mean to be a support-focused player? First and foremost, it means being adaptive to the situation at hand. Your job isn't to be out in front seeking all the glorious democracy yourself. Instead, your job is to react to what's happening with your team. About to push a major objective? Call in a mortar, communicate with your team, and thin the herd before the troops rush in. On the flip side, you need to constantly take the pulse of your team. This ranges from who needs supplies to who's dealing with an elite enemy. This build is designed so that you have all the tools available to handle any threat, but it does rely on crystal clear communication. When the build is at its absolute best, you'll be working with your team to support them no matter the situation. Using your recoilless, you're taking down high priority targets while also keeping your team safe within the shield generator. When that's still not enough, you have your weapons, which are just as potent in your hands as they are in the hands of a more frontline player. Again, This is my preferred playstyle as it really taps into the team dynamic of the game, but it's also specialized to co-op play. You can still make this work when joining random matchmaking groups, but I'd highly recommend taking the recoilless backpack yourself, as trying to coordinate with random players to get your weapons reloaded is a nightmare. So there you have it, our ultimate support guide that we guarantee will keep your team in the fight. Of course, there are so many different directions you can go with builds in this game, so if you're rocking something you think we should include in our next video, drop us the details in the comments below. Be sure to let us know what weapons and stratagems you're using, and if we spotlight your build on the channel, we'll be sure to shout you out in that video. As always, if you like our Helldivers 2 content and want more videos like this in your feed, be sure to drop us a like and consider subscribing. We've got more builds and guides coming your way, so keep it right here and never miss a thing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching and play on.